Reluctant to extend his involvement in the film, John Carpenter refused to direct and originally approached Tommy Lee Wallace, the art director from the original Halloween, to take the helm. Carpenter told one interviewer, "I had made that film once and I really didn't want to do it again." After Tommy Lee Wallace declined, Carpenter chose Rick Rosenthal, a relatively unknown and inexperienced director whose previous credits included episodes of the television series Secrets of Midland Heights from 1980 to 1981. Rosenthal was chosen to direct based on a short film that he had made, The Toyer, while a student at the American Film Institute. Deborah Hill had also considered directing at one point, but did not want to appear as just a protege of John Carpenter. Stylistically, Rosenthal attempted to recreate the elements and themes of the original film, stating, "Conceptually, it's not at all my film. It's a continuation of John Carpenter and Deborah Hill's film. But in execution, it's my vision." And so this film would be his major motion picture directorial debut with his 1981 film, Halloween 2.
Call the police! Tell the sheriff I shot him!
Who?
Tell him he's still on the loose!
Is this some kind of joke? I've been trick-or-treated to death tonight.
You don't know what death is.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I'll be back.
Death has come to your little town, June.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. Connor here along with Chris, and today we are continuing our deep dive and our reviews into the Halloween franchise with 1981's Halloween 2. So this was a film that, a lot like the first one, I watched a lot as a kid, and a lot of the times I would do like a little back-to-back, a two-parter, you know, when I was a kid and I had time on a weekend or something. Clearly, I mean, I wouldn't watch it every weekend, but when I had buddies over or something, we'd throw on the first Halloween and Halloween 2, or sometimes we would go like Halloween 4 and Halloween 5 or something. You know, we do like these double features of movies. We'd even go into like, we do the same thing with like Friday the 13th or some like creature features. You know, you turn on Jaws 1 and 2, or but this one, I love how this film especially picks up right after the ending of the original Halloween. I think this was the first film I had seen that actually did that. I know that some of the Friday the 13th have done that, but I believe I seen these two films were the one I seen before, and the first films I seen actually do that. So I like that. There's a lot I love about this film, a lot of memories growing up with it, and it's just it's a good time. It's not necessarily as like classic or near and dear to me as the first one, but it's definitely a fun time, and it's a one of those sequels that, as we've said before, kind of like some of the Fridays and some of the Jurassic Parks, you know, they're not great like the original, but they're a worthy sequel. So, Chris, what do you think about Halloween 2?
Yeah, that's very much my opinion. A worthy sequel. I also grew up having an affinity for the sequels that would pick up right where the previous movie left off. I always liked that. You know, the first, kind of in a sort of, all three Evil Dead movies kind of did that. You know, there's, like you mentioned, Friday the 13th, 2, 3, 4 sort of do that. You know, it was always fun. But this one, especially in the way that it just kind of starts, you know, immediately doesn't lose tension. You know, I always had that kind of childhood fantasy of like, oh, they should do a DVD where it just has them both and it just runs together from the end of one right into the beginning of the other one. You know, I always wanted something like that to happen. So this was always fun for that. So there were always a lot of double features and things like that involved in this one. And for a long time, you know, 1 and 2 were sort of the bedrock of the story. And then it was from there, you then, you know, did the choose your own adventure of where you went after that. Do you go to 3? Do you go to 4? Do you go to H2O? You know, you have the kind of splintering timelines. But 1 and 2 were always sort of locked in as like the starting points. So it's got that just strong connection in so many ways to the original, and so it's always been fun for that. But yeah, I would say, a worthy sequel. It can't be the original; that's impossible. But quite solid, and it does some nice key additions to the lore. Not only does it introduce the long reused concept of Lori being Michael's sister, but also, you know, a little bit of a recurring music theme with Mr. Sandman. Like that's kind of like a bit of an iconic piece of the franchise for some people, and it was introduced in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it continues. It continues the trend of like there's not so much of it in this one, like the smoking and drinking and sex and you die kind of trends like that. But I like that it continues the story with Lori. After the first film, like coming to the hospital, and when I was younger, I didn't catch the scene. Like I didn't really pay attention to how Michael ended up figuring out that she's at the hospital. And once I got a little older, he runs into a kid carrying a boombox on his shoulder, and they're the on his boombox they're playing that 17-year-old survivor Laurie Strode. She was taken to the hospital, and it bam runs into Michael, and like there's just nice little like nods to like that as a kid you don't always catch to like
Mm-hmm.
that progress the story and actually explain like how Michael like ended up finding Lori again and like tracking her down. And as a kid, you just think like, oh, this guy is just like supernatural and like he knows where she's at. He's stalking her. So on a rewatch, I had fun with a lot of those like things that I noticed a little later on growing up and kind of like pointed them out to myself. Like, yeah, I didn't catch that as a kid, or I didn't never notice this as a kid. And like, it's just a fun sequel. And again, like I like how it starts up right after the original. I wish more films would do that nowadays. And this was one of the ones that me and my older sister would watch all the time. I mean, every Halloween. I mean, these were definitely on the TV. We were watching the Fear Fest or the Scream Fest on AMC and all that growing up. So these first two have so much, like they got so much replay time in our home that it was almost ridiculous.
Yeah. And it is interesting to see how much they want to play. How much is Michael just this sort of mysterious being who just kind of knows things and does things. Like in the first one, he drives a car without issue, but logically, there's no reality where he should know how to drive a car. And even if you try to say someone taught him, it's like the idea of someone teaching Michael Myers how to drive is almost even more ridiculous than him just knowing how to drive. You imagine someone in the passenger seat be like, okay, put it in gear, like that's even more ludicrous. But it just kind of, it's just one of those things where it just kind of happens. So you can tell like they're walking a line. Like, does he just kind of know she's at the hospital, or do we have to build in a reason for him to know she's at the hospital? If he's smart enough to drive a car and be that aware, would he maybe assume she was taken to a hospital and just think to check on his own anyway, because someone would deduce that anyone who was attacked would probably be taken to the hospital? So it's if you start to talk about that and dissect those things, it starts to kind of just give you headaches.
I absolutely see where you're coming from, and it's just it's a good time. It's not very much longer than the first one, and I think director Rick Rosenthal. I mean, I think he definitely he delivers a good sequel. I mean, there's parts of this that aren't great. There's parts of this that don't live up to the second or the first film. But I mean, he ups the body count, he ups the blood and gore. I mean, we get I think another great soundtrack to the film. And I mean, the tunes in this and the tracks are a little different than John Carpenter's score in the first one, but I still enjoy them. So I mean, we'll dive into a little more, but I hold this sequel as a very high sequel to compared to the original, and you don't say that about a lot of sequels in some other franchises.
Yeah, and I think because Carpenter kind of came back and then had a collaborator on the score for this one. don't know how much was done by who, or if there's specific tracks, or if it was an overall collaboration. But like the score is really good. It's a nice evolution. Like they continue to go into that synthesizer kind of route, and I really like that. It helps give the film a little bit of that same kind of spirit that it needs to have, where even though John Carpenter didn't come back to direct, he's still got this sort of his fingerprints on this in a really fun way. And and all of the returning cast members kind of help it feel cohesive and things like that. And they do these nice little sort of like, they do the obvious things, which is Laurie's back, Loomis is back. They bring back the I don't want to say nurse, but the assistant that was helping Loomis in the first movie at the beginning, and she's back here. And then they also, like they continue to pull like the Ben Tramer thread. He was just a mentioned character in the first one, but now like they kind of do something with him here. Like it sort of helps make that world feel more cohesive and more, connected and tangible. It feels it all like it all feels kind of real and connected, and I like that. So it is a good sequel. It is a worthy sequel, and definitely worth checking out. A good companion piece to the first movie. If you love the first one and it's a masterpiece and it stands alone, but you can get a little bit more, and if you choose to, you can this can be stopped, and it feels like a nice completed 2-part story. So it's like it kind of goes well with the first one without necessarily hooking you into all 10 other entries in the franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you a little background on the film before we hop into a trailer on Halloween 2 and then get into a plot synopsis for the film. Halloween 2 is a 1981 American slasher film directed by Rick Rosenthal in his directorial debut, written and produced by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, and starring Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance, who reprised their respective roles as Laurie Strode and Dr. Sam Loomis from the original film. This is the second installment of the Halloween film series and serves as a direct sequel to the original film. The story picks up immediately after the cliffhanger ending of the first film, with Michael Myers, played in this film now by Dick Warlock, following survivor Laurie Strode to the local hospital, while his psychiatrist, Dr. Loomis, continues his pursuit of him. Though Carpenter directed a good portion of this film and wrote the screenplay for the sequel, Carpenter realistically could not direct the entire film in time due to him directing his other film in that time frame, appointing the direction to Rick Rosenthal. Filming took place in the spring of 1981, primarily at Morningside Hospital in Los Angeles, California. Stylistically, Halloween 2 reproduces certain key elements that made the original Halloween a success, such as first-person camera perspectives, and was intended to finish the story of Michael Myers and Laurie Strode. It also introduces the plot twist of Laurie Strode being the sister of Michael Myers, an element that would form the narrative arc of the series in subsequent films after Halloween 2. Including Rob Zombie's remake and its sequel, but was dropped from the current series canon from the 2018 film onwards. So there's a little background on Halloween 2 from 1981. Why don't we go ahead and get into a trailer on the film? We'll get a plot synopsis read off, and we'll come back with the same old good stuff, the numbers, the fun facts, get into our favorite categories, and then continue on with the fun from there.
Sounds good to me.
I shot him 6 times. I shot him in the heart. Man, he's not human.
Universal Pictures presents Halloween 2. More of the night he came home.
Who is it?
There was nothing within him, neither conscience nor reason, that wasn't even remotely human.
This is some kind of a joke. I've been trick-or-treated to death tonight.
You don't know what death is.
Janet, go tell Mr. Garrett we're having trouble with the phones.
There is no place to hide. He will always find you.
What's this? It's a Celtic word. It means the Lord of the Dead.
Mr. Garrett?
Halloween 2. More of the night he came home.
On October 31st, 1978, in the town of Haddonfield, Illinois, Michael Myers is shot by a psychiatrist, Dr. Sam Loomis, and falls off of a balcony. He survives his wounds and escapes into the night. Wandering the alleys, he steals a kitchen knife from an elderly couple, the Elrods, and kills Alice Martin, the teenage girl next door. Meanwhile, Laurie Strode, who narrowly avoided being killed that night, is taken to Haddonfield Memorial Hospital while Loomis continues his pursuit of Michael, accompanied by Sheriff Lee Brackett. Loomis mistakes teenager Ben Tramer for Michael due to Ben wearing a similar mask, resulting in Ben being hit by a police car, which veers into a nearby van and bursts into flames, burning Tramer to death. The bodies of Annie Brackett, Linda Vanderklok, and Bob Sims are discovered by the police at the Wallace residence. Upon learning his daughter Annie has been killed by Michael, Sheriff Brackett blames Loomis and abandons the search, leaving Deputy Gary Hunt to take his place. At the hospital, paramedic Jimmy Lloyd develops an attraction to Laurie, but head nurse Virginia Alves limits the time he spends with her. After hearing a news flash revealing Laurie's location, Michael makes his way to the hospital, where he cuts the phone lines and disables all the cars in the parking lot by slashing all the cars' tires so no one can escape and call for help. Wandering the halls in search of Laurie, he kills the security guard Bernard Garrett, Dr. Frederick Mixter, paramedic Bud Scarlatti, and several nurses throughout the night. In her hospital room, Laurie dreams about the time she learned she was adopted and remembers she once visited a young Michael at the sanitarium. Jimmy and Nurse Jill Franco grow increasingly concerned when they discover that more and more staff have gone missing throughout the night and search the hospital for Laurie, who's trying to evade Michael. As Jill tries to start the car to drive to the sheriff's department, it fails to start and she sees that all the car's tires in the parking lot have been slashed. After finding Miss Alves dead, strapped to a gurney with an empty IV needle in her arm draining all of her blood out of her body, Jimmy turns to run to go for help, but he slips in a pool of her blood and knocks himself unconscious, giving himself a concussion. Meanwhile, Loomis is informed that Michael broke into the local elementary school earlier. He discovers clues connecting Michael to Sam Hain and the occult, which might explain his apparent indestructibility. His colleague, Marion Chambers, arrives to escort him back to Smith's Grove on the governor's orders and under the enforcement of a U.S. Marshal Terrence Gummel. On the way, Marion tells Loomis that Laurie is Michael's younger sister. She was put up for adoption after the death of Michael's parents, with the record sealed to protect the family. Realizing that Michael is after Laurie and being told she was brought to Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, Loomis forces Gummel at gunpoint to drive back to Haddonfield. Jill finally finds Laurie only to be killed by Michael, who then pursues Laurie to the hospital. She manages to escape to the parking lot and hides in a car. Jimmy regains consciousness and soon arrives and tries to start and drive the car to safety, but passes out again due to the concussion sustained from the slip and fall, causing the horn to blare, attracting Michael's attention. Loomis, Marion, and Gummel reach the hospital just in time to save Laurie. Loomis shoots Michael until he falls down, seemingly dead. While Marion calls the police on Gummel's radio, the marshal tries to check Michael's pulse as Loomis warns him to stay away, knowing he isn't dead. Michael revives and slits Gummel's throat with a scalpel. Loomis and Laurie run into an operating room where he gives her Gummel's gun before being stabbed by Michael. Laurie shoots Michael in both eyes, blinding him. As he swings the scalpel around the space violently, the two fill the room with flammable gas. Loomis orders Laurie to get out before igniting the gas, immolating himself and Michael in an explosion. Laurie watches as Michael, engulfed in flames, emerges from the fire before finally collapsing. The next morning, she is transferred to another hospital traumatized but alive.
All right, how about I jump into some numbers here on Halloween 2? Halloween 2 had a budget of $2.5 million compared to just $325,000 for the original, and the film grossed a total of $25.5 million at the box office. So what are those inflation numbers for us?
Yeah, so that budget would be about $8.8 million, and that box office return would be about $90 million. So that's the ROI is still good there. That's still pretty impressive to drop less than 10 and make almost 100. That's really good. That's a really good return.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not big, movie money like the original, but it's still, the first one was lightning in a bottle, and this one just tried to capitalize on it a couple years later.
Yeah, and the first one was one of those phenomenons that kind of, one town would get it, then the next town would get it. And so it just kind of, the gag and the joke that people say is that, like, yeah, most people who saw Halloween when it was big didn't see it in 1978. Most people saw it in 1979 when it was kind of just rolling across the country, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, kind of the first one spread kind of word of mouth, like you said. It only opened in, I believe it was like 200 theaters to start, or a little under, and then it's not like your major motion picture today where it opens in 1,500 theaters or whatever it is today.
4,000 locations,
Yeah,
yeah.
worldwide
Yes,
and
yeah,
everything
exactly.
else. But I mean, this was, I mean, clearly according to the box office, this was a successful sequel.
It's very successful. I mean, without a doubt, it's hugely successful.
Yeah, and I mean, critics, I mean, they were hit or miss on it. It's rated a 6.5 out of 10 on IMDb, which, I mean, anybody can go nowadays on IMDb and give their rating out of 10. But I mean, it did get killed on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a 33% rating on Rotten Tomatoes with an average rating of 4.8 out of 10. It has a 40% rating on Metacritic, but our Google users saved it with a 82% of Google users liking this
Yeah,
film.
Google users, for better or worse, it's the voice of the people, the common folk.
Yeah, I mean, IMDb and our Google users are both high, and then which are pretty much fan services to rate the film, and then our Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic are our critics that are down on it.
You're snobs that don't like to have fun.
Exactly. I mean, this is a follow-up to a phenomenal film set on the same exact night as the first film. I mean, I think it's fun, and I just think that it was one of those early to mid 80s horror films, and critics back then were just hard on them all.
Yeah. Do you ever see the movie Signs?
I have, yes, not for a
Yeah.
very long time.
You remember the scene in the movie where they're talking about the people that are doing the crop circle hoaxes, and Joaquin Phoenix says, it's just a bunch of guys who can't get girlfriends, just a bunch of nerds who can't get girlfriends doing this stuff. He's like, nerds were doing it 30 years ago. New nerds are doing it now. And sometimes when I think about the critics always hating horror movies, it's like, yeah, it's just a bunch of film nerds that think their S don't stink, and they were hating on horror movies 30 years ago, and now they're hating on new horror movies now. It's just how it goes.
They want to go see the horror movie, but they can't get a date night, so they
Yeah,
decide to hate
exactly.
it.
Yeah, exactly. They don't get invited to the free press screening, so they just decide to crap on the movie.
Well, at least horror movies are getting a little bit more love nowadays, so I mean, I
Yeah,
can appreciate that.
indeed.
My last two numbers for you are, of course, the most important. Halloween 2 has a kill count of 10, which averages to one kill every 9.2 minutes. And then Michael Myers is on screen for 12 minutes and 21 seconds, or roughly about 13% of the film.
Yeah, that seems to strike a good balance. You gotta about 10. When you talk about people's attention span, when they talk about TV, they're always the television rule is like, oh, something interesting or dramatic has to happen every 8 minutes. When you cut a commercial break or something. So in a movie, a slasher movie, that kind of 8 to 10 minute rule, you want someone getting killed or something kind of wild happening about every 8 to 10 minutes. That tracks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like in this one how we we talked about in the first film that Michael is kind of left in the shadows a lot, and I like in this one how they kind of keep that, how he's hidden. We see him in glimpses behind people or hiding in the shadows. I like how they kept that similar to the first one.
Yeah, the hidden Michaels are always fun.
So that is all I have for you on numbers. I will get into some fun facts and we'll knock these bad boys out before we get into the good stuff.
Sounds good.
So my first one for you here is, while the gross earnings of the sequel paled in comparison to the original's $70 million and $47 million domestically, it was a success in its own right, besting the earnings of other films of the same genre released in 1981, as in Friday the 13th Part 2, which grossed just under $22 million. The Omen 3, The Final Conflict, which grossed just under $20.5 million. And The Howling, which grossed just under $18 million at 17.9. So, I mean, it definitely got its money's worth. And you know, when you're battling with Friday the 13th, that the first one came out and was very popular, and then you get the second one the very next year, it's coming out, you know, they're getting them hot off the press. So when you best that, and you're a little older and a bigger time gap between sequels, I mean, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, think about, it's interesting to look back in the history of, like, yeah, that was one year that had a sequel to Friday the 13th and a sequel to Halloween. Like, to be a slasher fan in 1981, like that's some good times you're living in.
Yeah, absolutely. Two of my favorite franchises. So I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
people back then felt the same.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and at that point, you just had the originals to go off of, so it was like these iconic films, these standalone iconic films, both getting part twos within the same year. That's pretty impressive and
Pretty
exciting.
historical.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they knew not what they were starting by giving these movies sequels at that point. It was just, oh, those were great movies, and here's more of it.
Yeah.
A
12
lot to be
films later
enthusiastic.
for one and
Yeah,
13
yeah,
films later for another.
yeah. A lot to be enthusiastic about at the time.
Absolutely. My next one for you here is, Carpenter and Hill, the writers of the first Halloween, had originally considered setting the sequel a few years after the events of Halloween. They planned to have Michael Myers track Laurie Strode to her new home in a high-rise apartment building. However, the setting was later changed to Haddonfield Memorial Hospital in script meetings, and Carpenter described that his writing of the screenplay mainly dealt with a lot of beer, sitting in front of a typewriter saying, "What the fuck am I doing?" So he clearly wasn't enthusiastic about writing the sequel.
Yeah, I mean, that might, that's one way to describe writer's block, I suppose.
He
But
was trying to go on a personal strike.
yeah, it's fun to see, like, the idea of, they say, like, oh, high rise apartment building. You can see how, we end up with a movie where there's a lot of, like, Michael in hallways and chasing, you know, Laurie is, like, going through, like vents and dropping into other rooms, and, like, you could see those kind of visuals be at play in that sort of apartment building, high rise apartment building kind of complex. Michael would have thrown someone out of one of those windows. There would have been a lot. That might have even been how they killed Michael at the end. Maybe he goes out of the high rise apartment. Like, you can see where some of that could have been at play. And then maybe just the more economic thing is, like, look, let's roll right out of the momentum of the first movie. It's kind of be maybe seen as like a bit of a cop out of, oh, the body's not there, and this is now 3 years later. But it's like, what is the story of the rest of that night? That body's not there, and Loomis doesn't stop. And what is the story of the rest of that night? What happens when Laurie's taken to the hospital? What if, and Michael's still out there? What if he finds out she's at the hospital? Like, that, I can see how that idea would come to them, and then it would just feel like this movie would write itself.
Yeah, like the story would have a much better flow than skipping a couple years, and like, how does he find Laurie Strode 4 years down the road? And I mean, there's things you could do with that. Like, you could have something, you know, a chase scene in the parking garage or down the stairways or something like that. There's a lot
there's a
you could
lot of
do.
good horror, like deserted horror imagery that you could have. And also, like 3 years later, like, do you have a contrived reason which Loomis gets back involved in things instead of his initial hunt for Michael? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. This film is just kind of as it is in the hospital setting. It flows better. It's a little. I feel like it's a more catchy sequel idea.
Yeah, for sure. Give me that special 4K edition cut that has it put together with part one as like a 3 hour movie.
Hey, I'm right there with you. We can
All
make.
you got
I'm
to do is
sure.
do a little bit of some editing trickery to edit, from the end of part one into the appropriate spot at the beginning of part two, and you could make that work. You can make that work, and I think it could be a lot of fun.
I'm sure some YouTube sucker somewhere has
Yeah,
done that
yeah.
before.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm sure there's that YouTube video on there where you can kind of experience those couple of minutes of that transition.
Absolutely. I'll continue on with some fun facts. Halloween 2 was filmed over a 6-week period, starting on April 6, 1981, and ending on May 18th, 1981, for an October release of the same year. So I mean this film got shot, edited, everything. It was a pretty quick turnaround. So I mean it's a pretty good film for being that quick, just like the first one.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Simpsons meme where it's the grandpa and then he says something and then he goes, which was the style at the time. And it's like, yeah, back in these days, the horror movie sequels were basically made and released like 1 year after each other. It was the style at the time.
Yeah, they were rolling hot off the press like the newspaper every morning.
Yeah,
They were
getting
coming out.
they were getting the green light like after the first weekend.
Oh yeah, when you can make a movie for $1 million or $2 million and make 15-20 million every time, and I mean for years on end, this was how it was for the horror community or the horror genre. So I mean,
Yeah,
why not keep
that's
making those?
that's free real estate.
Yeah. So Halloween 2 did do well at the box office. It was a box office success, becoming the second highest grossing horror film of 1981 behind An American Werewolf in London, which grossed $30.5 million in 1981, which I don't know if we've said this before between us, but I have seen bits and pieces of that film and I have never seen the film in its entirety.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I have a friend who's a huge fan, and I've seen clips and I know the movie, but I've never actually gotten the chance of actually sitting down and watching that one all the way through. That's one of like those horror movies that it just never happened to me. Just like people talk about like the Phantasm movies and things like that. Like there's some just horror franchises and the Hellraiser movies. There's some that like just never really in my atmosphere that I ever kind of crossed paths with them in a way or was interested in a way of actually wanting to watch them.
See, I have seen the first two Hellraiser movies, and I know there's like 10 of them nowadays. And I liked the first two, but I've heard that they get really bad down the road, like in a like B movie territory. And I have watched all the Phantasm movies, and I am I'm a pretty big fan of all five of the Phantasm films. So
Oh gosh, there's 5 of them. Wow, so that shows
yeah.
how little I know about those movies. Jeez.
I think those films are absolute fun. I want to do those on here someday, but I mean, we have some future plans already, so we'll have to wait on those ones.
Yeah, maybe one day.
To achieve the bloody tears scene in this film, according to Dick Warlock, in the mask's forehead was a bulb of fake blood, and when Dick Warlock stumbled back and kind of smacked his hand on the mask, is when the bulb would rupture and the blood was released down the mask, causing the bloody tears.
The good old school practical effects.
Something as simple as that, it's in the film, it's super effective. So I mean,
Yeah.
I like the effect that they did with that.
Yeah, these days it would be some convoluted CGI nonsense.
Yeah,
These days
pretty
they
much.
wouldn't even do it. These days they wouldn't even do it because they would do the annoying thing I did, and I'd be like, "Well, if they shot him in the eyeballs, why would it doesn't make sense? It would just go straight through his head and yada yada." They'd have someone like me who would just completely make them convince them not to do that idea. But it's like, you could have still done it. Just find another way to get the sort of bloody tears visual, have him be stabbed in the eyes or something, but whatever.
Chris would be calling a special effects artist to make a fake head that just blows to smithereens, and then he's gonna regenerate his head like Godzilla in -1 or something.
Oh my, yeah. Good Lord, yeah. Please.
So I threw this one in here for you specifically, and it's Donald Pleasance was nominated for a Saturn Award for Best Actor for his performance at the 1982 Saturn Awards, but he lost to Harrison Ford, who won for Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, no complaints about Harrison Ford winning for Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's well deserved. But I mean, in another world, Donald Pleasance should have got something for this movie, because I mean, it's a heck of a performance, And I mean, in the pantheon of horror movies, where horror films are not always necessarily known for their great acting performances. Donald Pleasance is in the most elite of the elite in terms of acting quality in horror films.
Yeah, absolutely. He knocks these Halloween roles out of the park, and I mean, I know he's in Prince of Darkness, and I mean a handful of others. I mean, he's been in a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, he'll always be Dr. Loomis to me.
100%. You and me agree on that. Absolutely. So I have two more for you here. And my next one is, to get the role of Michael Myers, Dick Warlock revealed that as he passed by a room, the Michael Myers mask was sitting on a table. He walked in and put the mask on and walked into Rick Rosenthal's office and stood there. And after Rosenthal continuously asked him who he was and Dick Warlock didn't reply, he took off the mask and asked if he could play the part as Michael Myers in Halloween 2.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's just, imagine that, it's like those kind of stories that it's like, man, does Hollywood even exist in a way where anything like that could ever happen these days? You hear about like the weird, crazy things that George Lazenby did to get the James Bond role after Connery. Like, he went to the same tailor and had them make the suit, and then just like walked into the offices and said, "I hear you're looking for James Bond." Like, like brash stuff like that. Like, it just feels like we're not in a world where those kind of fun stories happen anymore.
No, and I mean, as a director, like Rick Rosenthal, like you'd like to ask him, like, did this creep you out? Like, were you creeped out by that, or were you just like annoyed that somebody was standing in your office not answering you, or like, what was your initial reaction?
Yeah, why didn't you call 911?
Like this guy clearly, took a film prop and is just standing there. You don't know if he's gonna attack you or if he's some crazy guy, and that it's just an actor. He takes it off and he's like, "Hey, I want to play Michael Myers. Like, what do you think?" And
yeah,
like, I'm gonna go to Hollywood and walk around with a mask until I meet a director and be like, "Hey, I want to be the next Michael Myers."
Yeah, I wish I still wish that we could have gotten Nick Castle in here, but that's all right.
Yeah, I'm not gonna hate on Dick Warlock at all. I think he did a fine job in this film, and I mean, I would have welcomed Nick Castle back as well. So I have nothing bad to say about either of those two. All right, I got one more fun fact for you here on Halloween 2, and it's it's kind of a story that it definitely connects to this film. So there was an incident with minor connections to the film heightened attitudes about the potent effects of media violence on young people. And on December 7th, 1982, Richard Delmer Boyer of El Monte, California, murdered Francis and Eileen Harbitz, an elderly couple in Fullerton, California, leading to the trial People versus Boyer in 1989. The couple were stabbed 43 times by Boyer, and according to the trial transcript, Boyer's defense was that he suffered from hallucinations in the Harbitz residence brought on by the movie Halloween 2, which defendant had seen under the influence of PCP, marijuana, and alcohol. And then the film was played for the jury, and a psychopharmacologist pointed out various similarities between its scenes and the visions the defendant described. Boyer was found guilty and sentenced to death, and the incident became known as the Halloween 2 murders and was featured in a short segment on TNT's Monster Vision, hosted by film critic Joe Bob Briggs. Following the trial, moral critics came to the defense of horror films and rejected calls to ban them. So I thought I'd put that in there, and I thought that was a little on the crazy side.
Yeah, very crazy. And of course, ignore the fact that he was on all kinds of drugs and be like, well, he watched a horror movie, and so that's what caused it.
Yeah, they always
Like,
like to blame horror movies and video games for the
well,
violence and things like
and
that.
and the law of averages will tell you that anything that exists media wise, if it converges with someone who is mentally unwell or prone to violence, it yes, it could possibly trigger some sort of violent outburst from that person. And you could say, hey, maybe if that mentally unstable person hadn't encountered that violent media or entertainment, maybe that violent incident wouldn't have happened. But that's the law of averages, that it's like, well, okay, so what do we do? Do we not create any video games? Do we not create any media? Is any violence at all allowed? Do we outlaw everything? Do we live in a completely sanitized society and environment because there are crazy people out there? It's like, do we change the laws because one person, it's just one of those things where it's like, look, bad things do happen. Crazy people do exist. Violent people do exist. Crime does happen. You're not going to be able to sort of legislate and coddle your way into the sort of utopian society where like nothing bad ever happens to anyone and no one ever does anything bad or thinks anything bad or does anything. You're not going to be able to make that happen. So it's like you can't carry these thoughts through, and be like, well, nobody should make horror movies because there's that low percentage of people that if they see them it makes them unwell or something. It's like you can't run a world like that.
Yeah, the only thing I ever said about something like that is like the video games and horror films and stuff might give those unwell people like ideas or something like that, but they were already an unwell person or whatever word you want to use for them. And I mean, the movie might give them ideas or kind of things like that, but it doesn't force them to do the actions that they did. So
Yes, and it's not like murder started to exist after movies and video games and media and entertainment started to exist. People have been committing murders for as long as people have existed. So, it's not like it's like, oh, we were in a utopia and then movies were invented and now people kill each other. It's like, well, that's not true. So, what are you going to do?
exactly. I just wanted to throw that in there. That was
That
kind
is
of
wild though.
yeah, it was definitely one of the fun facts that I seen, and I was just like,
Not so fun of a fact.
right, just kind of a horror fact.
Yeah.
But
Golly.
I
And of
wanted to
course
put it
they're
in
gonna
here.
call it of course they're gonna call it the Halloween 2 murders.
Yeah, got to connect it to something. Got to blame
Mm-hmm.
something.
Gotta get some controversy, yep.
So that is all I have for you on the fun facts here. Why don't would you like to start and give me your favorite character of Halloween 2?
Yeah, you can call me boring, but second verse, same as the first. I like Loomis again in this movie. You just can't deny Donald Pleasance's performance, and unfortunately, Laurie Strode, portrayed by Jamie Lee Curtis, doesn't get a lot of dialogue and dramatic material to work with in this movie. There's a lot of her semi-comatose. There's a lot of her just kind of running, and a lot of her just like not really speaking or interacting very much with anyone else. So Jamie Lee Curtis doesn't really get a chance to show a lot of, dramatic chops and a lot of interesting things, while Donald Pleasance is, sure, he's kind of running back the same performance he gave in the first one, but he's delivering, that those lines of dialogue with that signature kind of Loomis style, and he gets a little bit of a monologue or two here and there, and he gets to kind of keep doing the same thing, and it's a great performance and character to watch. So he gets to shine a bit more in this one.
So I was boring with you as well. Then I went with Dr. Loomis as well, and for all the reasons you said. And again, we get a little more time with him in this film. He's trying to figure out like where Michael went, where he's going. They go and investigate like the school. They had the accident with who is supposedly meant to be Ben Tramer, who was mentioned in the first film, and all the authorities are saying, Michael Myers is dead. He burned up. and Loomis is completely on the other side, and he finally gets the cops to kind of like understand and be like, all right, like we'll continue looking for him as if he's alive and he's out there. And he comes to save the day once again at the end of the film. Like he's 2 for 2 in being the outstanding like character in the film. Like he stands out the most. He's got the best lines. He delivers his lines the best, or the most like they catch your attention. He has a very catchy performance in this one as well as the first one. And like you said, Laurie Strode, she's bedridden for like 70% of this movie, and finally when she does get up and Michael finds her, I mean she she's just running. She's running away, she's hiding. So she doesn't do a lot in this film like in the first one where she's actually fighting back and things like that. So I think Dr. Loomis was the obvious choice.
Agreed.
So I'll give you my favorite score or soundtrack from the film, and it was honestly, it was called "The Shape Stalks Again," and it was a different version of the Shape Stalks that we had in the original Halloween. There's like some added tempo and like a little bit of added drums, and it seems like it's a little more. It has a little more bass to it, and it happens right. It kicks in right after Michael kind of kills one of the nurses and sees Laurie, and he drops the nurse to the ground, and the music kicks in, and there starts our chase scene of the film. So that score just was the standout for me.
Yeah, we're 2 for 2 because that's exactly the track that I went with. A number of the tracks, a number of the themes from the first movie are sort of remixed or revamped into this one. You know, the main theme, the shape stocks becomes the shape stocks again, and they just kind of get this like added sort of, and maybe I'm being inaccurate in describing it, but it feels like this sort of extra synthesizer electronic vibe to them a little bit, and so there are all these like really cool and catchy kind of remixes of the original themes that they sound right, but they just have these extra layers of instrumentation to them, and they're just great. But the one that stuck out the most for sure was the Shape Stocks Again.
Absolutely, and again, I think we have 2 great scores here. You know, the soundtracks in this one are a little different, but I like how they changed it up. You know, this film, it has a different director, so there is a little bit of a different tone in this film than the first one. So I do like that we get a little bit of a change up for the soundtrack and the scores as well.
Yeah, it's this. If it feels like an evolution of the same kind of thing, not a totally different score. Like, because if this had been a film that just had gone with another composer and abandoned the musical identity of the first movie completely, you could just feel that the soul would be lost. That this would just be like a kind of generic sequel, you know. But it felt like there was efforts behind the scenes to try and keep it cohesive with the first movie, and that's the best thing it has going for it.
Absolutely agree with you. So we're 2 for 2. See if we can go 3 for 3 here. What was your favorite quote or most memorable line from the film?
So I have 2, but there's one that's clearly the best one, which is in the beginning of the film where a neighbor says, "Is this a joke? I've been trick or treated to death tonight." And Loomis snaps back saying, "You don't know what death is." And then followed immediately by the main theme of the film kicking in, and it's such an oh snap kind of a moment, just such a launches you into the movie, you know, and just sets the tone and the pace right from the beginning. This like high octane, you know, really kind of hammers in like the events of the last movie still ended, but we're just carrying that momentum through. and now Michael's gone, and we're just in for more of this night of terror. And so that's my favorite. That was my 1A, and I'll let you go, and we'll see if I've got room for my second choice.
Okay, and I did want to mention for your 1A, as soon as that like main theme kicks in, I do like those like opening credits with like the pumpkin like tearing apart and like falling apart. I thought that was a great intro for the film.
Indeed.
But my favorite quote, of course, came again from Dr. Loomis, and it's when him and the cop are going back and forth, and he goes, "He was my patient for 15 years. He became an obsession with me until I realized that there was nothing within him, neither conscious nor reason, that was even remotely human. An hour ago, I stood and fired 6 shots into him, and then he just got up and walked away. I am talking about the real possibility that he is still out there." And then, like, they just pause, and he asks, like, where'd they take the body? And they're talking about the coroner's office, and it's just a great scene, and it's a great delivery by Donald Pleasance yet again.
Yeah, for sure. It's good, letting Donald Pleasance just go. He's Ahab, and Michael Myers is his Moby Dick, and Donald Pleasance has to go after him, and he's got to take him out. I also like, it's more of a comedic exchange of dialogues, and forgive me for not censoring myself here, but the character of Janet says to Bud, "Every other word you say is either hell or shit or damn." And then he replies, "Sorry, I guess I just fuck up all the time." So that's one of the funniest lines in the movie, and I can't not remember it forever. So, I had to give it a shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, pretty much everything yet again that Donald Pleasance, Dr. Loomis says in this is could be gold. And like kind of when Sheriff Brackett kind of finds him right at the beginning, and he's like, "I shot him 6 times. I shot him in the heart."
Yeah.
He's like,
yeah, it almost even sounds like they're playing back the same audio of him saying, "I shot him 6 times a few times." It feels like he's delivering it the exact same way, like 3 or 4 times.
yeah, as he's getting in the car, he's like, "This man, he's not human." And it like there's so much, like, he just delivers great emotion in what he says. So like, especially in a film like this, having like a nice like moment where you could laugh like that for the quote you just brought up is nice. It's a calming moment, and then you get right back into the scares there in a couple minutes. So that it's a good line.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'll give you my favorite scene for the film, and it's the final hospital showdown. It's from the moment where Dr. Loomis kind of lets Laurie Strode in back into the hospital, and Michael walks through the glass of the door, the window of the door, and he shoots him 5 more times, and he falls. And from there on out, it's kind of, I don't know, maybe a 7 to 10 minute stretch where the security officer, or like the federal officer, gets killed for being a complete idiot, and another chase scene ensues where Dr. Loomis is trying to protect Laurie Strode in one of the hospital rooms, and he ends up getting stabbed and going down, and Laurie has to kind of defend herself, so she shoots Michael twice, and Dr. Loomis ends up getting back up and kind of just setting the room ablaze with releasing like all the ether and oxygen from the tanks. And it just from Michael kind of entering back into the hospital to the explosion is like my favorite sequence or scene in the film.
Yeah, and and I'm in agreement with you. That's actually the same sequence that I chose, but specifically, I like the beginning of that before Loomis lets Laurie into the hospital, when Laurie is on the ground and sees them and is trying to muster up the strength to call out and shout out, and she can't do it, and then the door slowly closing, and then she still can't get it out, and then as soon as the door closes, she screams, and it's too late. They don't hear her, and then Michael comes out of the building. Like, that is an excruciatingly tense sequence the first time you see it, and every time I watched it as a kid.
That was one of the ones I that got a lot of replay value or watches from me as a kid, from him kind of stepping out from the shadows into that like red light on his mask.
Yes.
And the chase, like the slow walk of him coming up to as she's pounding on the hospital doors. That's a very intense sequence. It would have been great to see that in theaters back in the day.
Yeah, indeed. And that's that Dean Cundy cinematography at play there. The man knows how to compose some shots.
Absolutely, it's a great finale for the film, and I mean, I have nothing bad to say about the final 15 minutes or so of this film at all.
Uh-huh. Agreed.
So, what was your favorite death scene or kill in Halloween 2?
I gotta go with the hot tub death, and that is just such an anxiety inducing and brutal death scene, because everyone has stuck their hand under the water when it's too hot, or they've turned that shower on a little too hot, and it got a little hotter than they anticipated, and everyone's experienced that. It triggers a lot of anxiety. It's one everyone can relate to, because everyone's turned the water up a little too hot, whether it be in the sink or the shower or what have you, and kind of been burned by hot water. Everyone knows what that feels like, or touched a hot pan. And so the idea of being repeatedly dunked into boiling water so many times that you're just boiled alive, and her skin's even boiling off, and it's very inventive and very brutal, and just absolutely like excruciating to watch. So that's always the death that I think of when I think about this movie. There's a lot of kind of stabby type deaths in here, but that one to me is always just like the most brutal one. And the fact that she initially sort of thinks that when Michael's hand is on her shoulder and she's like kissing it and sucking on his fingers and stuff, it gets a little weird and intimate, and like Michael's kind of like weirdly letting it happen, which is like adds this whole extra like weird element to it. And then he takes her and just like boils her and drowns her in this hot water, and it's just very like it's a very very creepy and violent sequence.
Yeah, it always kind of grossed me out when I was younger. Kind of gave me the ick when you start to see her skin start to peel off her face and stuff. And I always gave the movie crap for, like her skin is peeling off and she's getting just blazed under this water. But there's nothing happening to Michael's hand. It's perfectly fine. So it's just like, all right, this guy really is supernatural, or something's
Well, I
going on
mean, he's been
here.
shot multiple times at this point and got up and walked around. So,
Yeah, this is true. This is just my like 6-year-old, like, my the critic inside my head, like, oh no, he should have some type of burns on his hand. He's like scolding the heck out of her. So, but no, that is a great scene, and especially right before it, you see Bud get strangled, so that when Michael enters, like she thinks she's gonna think it's Bud, and she's got a bad time coming up here in a few seconds. So that is a great death scene. I ended up going with Nurse Karen, who is the one who ends up finding Lori kind of towards the end, right before the ending chase scene, and Michael just kind of pops out from nowhere behind her as she's like, "No, wait, Lori!" And Lori sees him, and Michael kind of stabs her and just picks her up very slowly, with the one hand, and lets her hang there, and her shoes kind of fall off, which for some reason always had a big impact on me when her shoes fell off when I was a little kid. And then he kind of just drops her to the ground, and it was kind of just like a heartless, like it's a terrible way to go, because you see Michael standing behind you, you get scared, and there's nothing you can do about it. Kind of just like the hot tub scene, she sees it last minute, and there's nothing she can do. She's gonna meet her fate very soon. But the stabbing of Nurse Karen kind of had a bigger impact on me when I was a little kid. So that one kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, for sure.
The hammer, the claw end of the hammer going into the security guard always kind of hit me the wrong way too. Like one of those things, like that's not a way you would want to go. Just like in Friday the 13th Part 2, we have a death kind of just like that with another officer.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and I always preferred the hammer to the head in this movie. The impact always just like registered as way more brutal in this film with the hammer to the head.
Okay, kind of how it doesn't show like the after effects of it. You just see the slamming down and the sound
Yeah,
effect, and it
you
kind of
see
cuts
that
away.
impact, and like, yeah, it's like this kind of there's kind of a bounce to it, but it almost just registers as like that's how hard he's crushing that thing into his head. I don't know, something about it. It's just like thunk, and something about it in this movie just always just felt like, damn, that's incredibly brutal.
Yeah, not a way I want to go.
No, not at all.
All right, so that's all I have for you on our favorites categories. So do we want to get into the mask of Michael Myers, or do we want to compare Friday the 13th 2 with Halloween 2?
I'd say we'll do mask, and then we'll do the comparison.
Okay. So I'll go first for mask, and then I'll let you kind of start on our comparisons, cuz this is it's the same mask as in the
It's
original
it's
film.
it's literally the same mask.
Yes, it's just we just have they said that the actor playing Michael Myers, Dick Warlock in this film, had a more rounded face than the character playing or the actor playing Michael Myers in the original Halloween film. So the mask kind of stretched out a little bit more along his face. So I when it comes to like comparing the two, I really do like the look that the mask has in this one with it's
Mhm.
a little bit tighter on his face, but I mean, with it being the same mask, it's crazy that it looks so different when
Yeah,
it's
well,
worn by two
and
different people.
yeah, well, and apparently, well, you mean 3 years has gone by essentially, but apparently, Deborah Hill, all she didn't do anything. They didn't do anything to preserve this mask. They didn't lock it up or do anything like that. And apparently, she just kind of like put it under her bed, and she's a smoker, and so like she was smoking in her house or her apartment or whatever, and like the mask was just like sitting under her bed like the whole time, maybe in like some like shoebox or something, but maybe not even that. Maybe it was just sitting there in the open. And so like 3 years of aging just kind of in the open air, and it's sort of like you can tell it looks like it's 3 years older. It looks like it's been kind of like worn and distorted and kind of weird, and you know they didn't put this thing in like a lockbox and seal it up in like a refrigerator or something. Like this thing was just like left out in the elements and has 3 years of exposure on it. So like it kind of has this like ugly worn feeling to it.
Yeah,
So like
some different color tones and
yeah, and it's across, it's supposed to be the same night. So I mean, in theory, it should look exactly the same, but it doesn't. So I mean, it's kind of this unfortunate thing. Like it's a cool bit of lore that it's literally the same mask, but it's like, man, maybe you almost should have tried to make a replicant of the first mask instead of using the 3 year aged, not well preserved original mask, Yeah.
yeah, I don't when it comes down to it, I don't know. I like the more kind of Michael in the shadows in the first film, but I can't say I like the look of the mask better in this one. It's like you said, it's a little more aged and worn down, but it like that first like the shots that we get of the mask in the first film are just so iconic that it's just that one has to have like the tops for me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, and I wish they had carried over the actor who performed as the Shape in the first film into this film, because there's just something about the way this new Michael moves and walks just feels a bit more mundane than how it is in the first film, that just felt like completely eerily and creepy and had this aura to it, if you will. And this one kind of often just a little bit just kind of feels like a guy walking around.
Well, in the first one, you can see that he's like he's kind of hauling ass walking. He's got a little more movement, and in this one, he's a little stiff. And there's a story that I read doing the research that Dick Warlock he was walking in the stiff manner that he does in the film, and he asked the producers and director, like, is there a different way you want me to do it? Like, am I walking okay? Do you want me to be a little more Frankenstein? Do you want me to be a little more loose with it? And they told him the way he was doing it currently is fine. And they kept
Yeah.
those in the film. And then later on, the producers and people that were helping out with the film, they bitched about his performance and complained about it, and he didn't understand because they were the first people that he went to and asked them, like, how do you want me to portray this? And they told him that he was doing fine.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, because apparently, there's all this praise heaped upon Castle's performance in the first one, of like how he walked and how he moved and whatever. But if you watch some of the behind the scenes stuff, he literally was like, John Carpenter said he picked him because he had a weird kind of like awkward, like creepy walk. And like he literally would say that, like, I would just walk, I would just move, I would just do it. Like, I was never given like any particular kind of like, here's how you move ominously, here's all the movement coaching we're going to do, here's all the practice we're going to do. Like, so it was kind of this thing where they were like, put him in the mask and they just told him to walk. And then they got this amazing result. And so I think that, when making this one, they kind of had the assumption of like, well, we just put, our last Michael performer, we just kind of put him in the outfit and told him to walk. And that turned out great with, editing and the lighting and the costume. So we'll just tell this guy to walk. And I mean, it's fine because it's going to all get cut together and edited together. And it's all just going to be, it's still going to be scary. It's not necessarily how he's walking that's doing it or his performance is doing it. It's everything else about the movie. And I think that's what their assumption was. So when he was like, hey, do I want to walk differently? Do you want something different? They're like, no, it's fine. Just walk. It's fine. Whatever. Just walk slow. You're good. And then they see the movie and they see, okay, maybe there is a screen presence here. Maybe the body movement does matter. Maybe the cadence of the walk and the style of the walk, maybe there is something of a performance that should be modulated in there. So then the easy thing to be like is, well, our Michael Myers kind of like didn't do a good job. Like that's the easiest, like that's the scapegoat. When they realize like, hey, maybe we should have tried harder to get what we needed. Now we're just going to say, well, the actor didn't do a good job. So it's just I think it's one of those things.
Yeah, and that would suck. You asked if you can do a better job, or if there's certain things you can do better, and they tell you no, it's fine, and then later on you're the one to blame. It's like
giving a bad line delivery, and the director's like, great, we've got it, no more takes, and you're like, okay. And then you get that weird bad line delivery in the finished movie, and he's like, yeah, I don't know what the actor was thinking on that one. That's really bad performance. It's like, dude, you were the director, like I'm giving you what you wanted. Like, you're the one that said cut and that we were good, So like, yeah, I can sympathize completely.
Yeah, I mean, it does suck for Dick Warlock in this film. My only thing is he's a little stiff, but I think he does a very he does a up to par job in this film, besides being a little stiff. Other than that, I have no complaints with him or the mask.
Yeah, it's not as good of a performance or Michael look as the first one, but it's not bad.
Absolutely. So when we get into comparing the two films, Friday the 13th Part 2 and Halloween 2, what are your takes when we compare these two films, Chris?
It's tough because I think Friday the 13th Part 2 is definitely better than Friday the 13th Part 1. So we have one sequel that is, in my opinion, a pretty clear improvement over the predecessor. And then Halloween 2, I think, even though it's good, it is pretty clearly a step down, even if not a big one, but a step down from Halloween. Halloween's a masterpiece that the sequel is not a masterpiece. Friday the 13th is not a masterpiece, and the sequel maybe isn't a masterpiece, but the sequel is extremely good. And so in terms of most improved from the original, Friday the 13th Part 2 gets big points for improving on the original Friday the 13th, but it's hard to say. I'm trying to think, like, is the score for Halloween 2 still better than the score for Friday the 13th Part 2? Probably. Is the Donald Pleasance factor from Halloween 2 kind of raise it a couple notches over Friday the 13th Part 2? Probably. But is the overall kind of like Friday the 13th Part 2 is kind of a perfection of the style. And the kills are great. And just the atmosphere and the vibe and the cast of characters is just much more lively. Halloween 2 is kind of, not to call it dull, but it's a little plain or pedestrian in a lot of ways. Like, it's kind of like low key. a lot of the characters don't do a ton to kind of stand out in really interesting ways. And granted, it's because they're all working in a hospital, as opposed to being at a camp. But like characters, you know, in Friday the 13th Part 2, kind of, the gentleman in the wheelchair, the girl with the dog, the kind of guy who's creeping on her, they kind of have these personalities, or at least these character archetypes, that kind of like make the human cast a little bit more lively and vibrant. And so it's tough, but I think I lean toward Friday the 13th Part 2.
Okay, I hear everything you're saying, and I agree with you on a bit of it. This is the way I'm kind of gonna do it, same way I did the first one. Friday the 13th Part 2. I think we definitely have a stronger final girl. I mean, she wallops Jamie Lee Curtis in these second parts of these franchises. So
Indeed.
final girl would go to Friday the 13th. I think score, as you said, would go to Halloween 2. Donald Pleasance, I would choose him as Dr. Sam Loomis for Halloween 2. I think the Friday the 13th 2 kills are better. Even just the wheelchair kill alone is more iconic than pretty much every kill in this second Halloween film, I would say. The portrayal of like Michael Myers compared to Jason Voorhees, I would lean towards Dick Warlock and Michael Myers for this film. And this one is tough. Like the first Halloween to Friday the 13th, like that was Halloween, no doubter. So like when it
this
comes
one's almost like, you could almost say tie, and that's okay,
I don't want to do that, because then I want to keep into my head like kind of like I'm 2-0 Halloween, or I'm 1-1 Friday the 13th Halloween. Like they're kind of tied right now. And as we go through the franchise, I want to see like what I really do like better. Like, all right, Halloween 1. I chose 7 of the Halloweens compared to 5 of the Friday the 13th, because there's 13 of these, but there's only 12 Friday the 13th. So 1 is kind of going to be off on its own. So, God, it's tough. I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about it, and I think I go Halloween 2. I really think I do, because of liking Michael Myers so much, and I think he's more established than Jason is in Friday the 13th Part 2. And I mean, it's close, and it's close because of the kills in Friday the 13th Part 2 are much better. And then Ginny as a final girl is leaps and bounds what Jamie Lee Curtis needed to be in this film. So, but I still lean for the music, Donald Pleasance, and then Michael Myers. I lean towards Halloween 2, even though it's like 51-49.
Yeah. And that's about how, it's a narrow victory. It's the first Halloween kind of washes the first Friday the 13th, but I think Friday 2 kind of edges Halloween 2 for me.
It's, if you ask me another day, if you ask me in a week, I might go back and forth on them. 1 week, say Friday the 13th.
And it is, you're like, oh, you're better final girl and your better kills and your better cast versus like your Donald Pleasance and your Halloween theme and your Mr. Sandman and those vibes, so it's kind of about what you value a little bit more. But I think I give the slight edge to Friday 2.
I see, we're not far off here. So I mean, I can't disagree with anything you're saying. I like the camp setting more than I do the hospital setting. Things like that. But it's little ticks and tacks here and there for what I like better in each film.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I think that's all we have on Halloween 2. So before we get out of here, we of course, as we said before, this film did have a sequel, and it was followed up by Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which was released October 22nd, 1982. So I know you said you haven't seen that one in a very long time.
Yeah,
is that?
Yeah, beginning to end, probably like 20 years.
Okay, so it's probably been a couple years for me as well. Clearly not that long, but maybe 4 or 5 years since I've watched it. And I mean, I watched it enough growing up that I have a pretty fond memory of it. I pretty much could probably watch the movie without being surprised by anything. But that'll be a fun conversation. I mean, this is kind of the people hated that movie when it came out, and it kind of gained a cult following. So it's kind of the black sheep of the Halloween films. So that should be a fun conversation following up on our next episode.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Looking forward to it. It's definitely a unique one-off entry in the series, so it's going to kind of be like a divergence from our main storyline before we get back to our main character here. So it'll be a fun, unique kind of discussion to have for sure. It's a different kind of horror movie.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different taste for us Halloween fans. And so before we get out of here, Chris, I'll say thank you for joining me yet again, because on these Halloween films, I'm having a blast, and I'm ready to keep knocking them out as we go along.
Yeah, 100%.
So thank you. Thank anyone who's out there listening as well. Don't forget, as always, vote on our polls and things like that. Keep up to date on our Facebook page, and then Halloween 3 Season of the Witch on our next episode. But until next time.
He was my patient for 15 years. It became an obsession with me until I realized that there was nothing within him, neither conscience nor reason, that was even remotely human. An hour ago, I stood up and fired 6 shots into him. He just got up and walked away. I am talking about the real possibility that he is still out there.